The dragon is an important figure in Chinese mythology. To a Chinese person, a dragon is not an evil creature, but a god, and a friend to those who worship him. I was born June 26th, 1892, in the year of the dragon. It is important to me that I was born in West Virginia, the land of my ancestors, for it means I am West Virginian by birth as well as ancestral heritage. It is equally important to me that I was taken to China when I was only 3 months old by my missionary parents, for it means that my home was West Virginia, but my environment was Chinese. In this atmosphere so delicately and yet so profoundly poised between East and West, I grew to maturity. I often found myself explaining Westerners to Asians and Asians to Westerners. Oh, this was not difficult, for I belonged, and still do belong equally, to both cultures. As I said, I was taken to China when I was only 3 months old by my missionary parents. I came to speak Chinese before I spoke English. I came to love the Chinese people as my own people. But make no mistake about it, the Chinese people loved me, but they made no bones about the fact that my blue eyes were not a proper color. And my hair, which was yellow when I was a child, was considered most unlucky. In fact, my nanny, Wang Ama, made a cap to cover up the unfortunate color of my hair. And just in case, she embroidered a little Buddha on the front, in case that Christian god should shirk his duty. But I think it was this bicultural existence that brought me to understand racism, as few white people in America can truly understand it. For I know what it's like to be treated differently because of the color of one's skin. And I will fight all my life to end race prejudice whenever and wherever I can. In fact, Langston Hughes calls me the Harriet Beecher Stowe of the 20th century. And Walter White, the executive secretary of the NAACP, said that only 2 white women in America, 2 white people in America, in fact, understood the American Negro dilemma. And that was my good friend, Eleanor Roosevelt, and myself. But I think the bicultural existence that I lived, living between 2 worlds, also brought me to be a writer. For writing gives you the closest relationship to people. And aren't people the most important thing in this world? The first book I ever wrote, I would say almost was by accident. I never intended for it to be published. I'd written a book about my mother, for she had passed away, and I longed to keep her memory alive. Of course, years later, it was published under the title of The Exile. And then my public called for another book about my father, and I published that one and called it Fighting Angel. And it was these 2 books about my missionary West Virginia parents that were cited when I received my Nobel Prize for Literature. And I'm glad I could take a piece of West Virginia with me to Sweden when I went to get that award. Oh, I've always considered myself to be a West Virginian, for I was born here and my ancestors were born here. You see, in China, it doesn't matter where you are living, but where you are born and where your people are from. From there you take your citizenship and your nationality. So I have always considered myself to be a West Virginian, for I was born here and my people were born here. If I had given a choice of the place of my birth, I would have chosen right where I was born, in my grandfather's large white house set with the beautiful mountains of Pocahontas County behind it. My mother had grown up there, but she longed to become a missionary to foreign lands, and she met a young man who shared her dream. Of course, that was Absalom Seidenstricker, my father. My father was a Presbyterian minister, and he had come to Hillsborough to visit his brother, who was also a Presbyterian minister. In fact, there were 7 boys in that family, and 6 were ministers. Well, 5 were Presbyterian, and 1, in the wildness of his youth, became a Methodist. But my mother and father realized they shared a dream, and they set off to be missionaries to China. And my mother came early to see the land of China for what it was and is to this day, a country of great contradiction, where the most beautiful in the world is inextricably bound with the saddest. My mother's attraction to China would bind her most strangely at times, for she too experienced great joy and great sorrow. She gave birth to 7 children, 4 of which died from the lack of medical resources available in the remote part of the world they lived. 3 died before I was even born. She was home on her furlough, the first furlough of her missionary career, when she realized she was pregnant with me and insisted upon staying in West Virginia, where she would be near the medical resources she realized she desperately needed. But as I said, I was 3 months old when we went back. So it was China that I knew as a child. China, a land of age-old nuances and limitless possibilities. China. There was so much about China I remember with fondness as a child. So many people that were truly important to me. I've already told you about Wang Ma. It was she who told me stories and songs of Chinese mythology. And today, I consider myself to be nothing more than a Chinese storyteller. And I credit Wang Ma with that gift. Mr. Kung was also important. He was my tutor and a Confucius scholar. He taught me a way of looking at the world that I have carried with me to this day. So you see, I had a very unusual upbringing. I had a Buddhist nanny, Confucius teacher, and Presbyterian parents. It's no wonder I became a writer. What do you do with that? But there was another China that I knew growing up. It was a China that was disturbed politically. For many generations, China had been dominated by the English and the Portuguese and the Dutch and the French, and it wanted its own nation back. Can you blame them? Even in their own nation, Chinese people were treated as second-class citizens by these white businessmen. And even those of us who loved the Chinese people and respected their culture could feel this growing distrust and resentment. When I was 9 years old, the Boxer Rebellion erupted, and my mother and I had to flee for our lives to Shanghai. But the revolution that would rock China did not come at that time, and peace covered China like a thin sheet of ice beneath which a river boiled. It wasn't until years later, when I was an adult with children of my own, the revolution finally came. I had a harrowing experience, almost losing my life when the Chinese army attacked Nanjing, where I lived, with the intent of killing all of the white people they found. I think it was that close brush with death that intensified my desire to write. I poured all of my thoughts and feelings into a book that I called Wang Lung. Today you call it The Good Earth. The Good Earth was an instant success, astonishing me beyond words. It was a best-selling book of 1931, 32, and 33. It won the Howells Medal, it won the Pulitzer Prize, and Will Rogers said it was the best book ever written, which didn't hurt sales, I might add. Now, many people think that I won the Nobel Prize for The Good Earth, but indeed, the 2 books that were cited were the books I told you about my West Virginia missionary parents. And in fact, the Academy said that I won the prize for the body of her work, as they said. And bookstores were besieged the next day with requests for Pearl Buck's new book, The Body of Her Work. I did receive a great deal of accolade for the Nobel Prize, for in fact, in my lifetime, I was the only woman to receive both the Pulitzer and the Nobel. But I also received a great deal of criticism. People said that my work was unimportant because I was a woman. They said that I wrote for women and therefore my work was unimportant. They said Theodore Dreiser should have won the prize. Indeed, Theodore Dreiser called me and told me he should have won the prize. Be careful when you become famous, for you will be attacked. The Academy did not take into account simply the fact of my writing, but also the active humanitarian causes I was involved in. I was actively anti-war. I spoke out against Hitler and Mussolini. I spoke out against the Japanese aggression in China and raised funds for medical relief. I spoke out to free India from England and to free the Japanese Americans interned in concentration camps. And I spoke out for women's rights and for racial injustice, to end that wherever possible. My friends, the shadow of racism is over all of us, but it is darkest over those of us who allow its evil influence to continue. Now, I know There are people in whom racism is ingrained. And if that is so, we must not allow those people to violate our nation's democracy. A truly democratic nation must ensure that all people are free, that they have freedom, not merely freedom from want, not merely freedom from fear, but the great freedom to be free. I would fight, I would die, I would go to prison for you, for me, for everyone. It is my only creed. Of course, my views on racial integration and ending race prejudice brought me a great deal of criticism from people such as Senator McCarthy and J. Edgar Hoover. But still, my influence was heard in that regard. And my sphere of influence went even further. Perhaps I am most known for my work for children's causes. Oh, I grieved that I could not have many children of my own. And so I poured myself into helping children around the world. And today, the Pearl S. Buck Foundation has helped over 100,000 children worldwide. And I can do this good work because my voice is heard. I have written over 100 novels, over 200 articles, over 100 children's stories and short stories, and produced 16 films. And my work is published into 60 different languages, more than any other writer in my day. I can do my work and be successful at it because I love my work. I can only say to those of you who are thinking about what to do with your life, search your hearts and your minds for your talents and your abilities, and devise a way of making a living out of doing what you love to do. Think about what you really like and make a career out of that thing. And if you can do that, you'll never be bored. You'll never be cynical. You'll never be rebellious. Every morning will be a joy, and you shall live in peace with yourself.